acknowledge those who are able could please stand. We acknowledge we are hosted on the lands of the Mississauga of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also acknowledge the enduring presence of all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Thank you. Okay, so at this time, I would like to ask if any trustees have any conflicts of interest to declare. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Can I have a mover and a seconder to go into committee of the whole private session, please? Trustee Arts.
Nunziata.
Thank you, Trustee Nunziata. And this is to consider matters that fall under Section 207(2) of the Education Act. All in favor, we'll just do this by a show of hands, or please say aye. Okay. And
Aye.
thank you. Any opposed? Okay, and so moved. We're now in private session. Okay, can I have a motion to accept the decisions made in private? Trustee DeVitis and Trustee Williams, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so at this time, we are going to move on, and we will move to item number 5. Let me actually just make sure that we're back in, are we back in public? We are? Okay, we're back in public. So we're going to go to item number 5, which is the report of the Committee of the Whole private session from June 22nd, 2023. And I would just remind everybody that in eScribe, you need to go back into the regular meeting, the 4:30 meeting. What's wrong?
This is it. 8 o'clock meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm working off the wrong agenda.
So this is why you
Sorry. Pardon me. We're moving to item number 6. I should be looking at eScribe. I was just going into that. I had the 8 p.m. agenda. Okay, so we are moving into the committee reports, which is item number 6. And we're going to start with item number 6.1, which is the Finance, Budget, and Enrollment Committee, special meeting report number 12 from June 20th, 2023. Item number 1, which is continuing education program budget report. And I'm going to turn it over to the director to introduce this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, I will ask Associate Director Louise Zarisco to present this report.
Thank you, and through you, Board of Trustees at the June 13, 2023 special FBEC meeting, trustees requested an outline itemizing the breakdown by program of the $6.7 million net deficit for continuing education. The report before you is a summary of all that continuing education is responsible for in the service of adult students, students who are seeking development of a language that is being nurtured in their family home and many other programs, as well as the operational costs and whether it is in surplus or deficit. We did speak about this in quite extensive detail at the last FBEC meeting, and we'd be pleased to answer any further questions in the specifics of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions on this item and none in the chat. So with that in mind, we will open the vote on eScribe. Oh, my apologies. I need a mover and a seconder for item number 6.11. I've got Trustee Rajagulasingham and
Nunziata.
Thank you, Trustee Nunziata. We'll now open the vote.
Trustee Lees in favor.
Trustee Rajwani in favor.
Trustee Rajwani in favor.
Trustee Hassan in favor.
Trustee Pei in favor.
Is she here? Trustee Sriskandarajah, how do you vote? Okay, we're not hearing anything, so please mark her as absent. Okay, and I would just ask at this time if we could have any trustees who have joined the meeting to please identify themselves. I see Trustee Rajagulasingham has come into the room, but online I'm just wondering if we have anybody else who's joined since I did roll call. Trustee Lee, are you present?
Yes, Madam Chair, and I'm voting in favor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 6.1.2. This is the committee report on the final 2023-2024 budget estimates that was referred without recommendation on Tuesday evening. I'm going to turn it over to Director Russell Rollins to begin this evening.
Thank you very much. Through the chair. Before you this evening is the final budget estimates for the upcoming school year. Since March 8th, 2023, the board and the Finance, Business and Enrollment Committee have been involved in budget deliberations totaling what seems like hundreds of hours and tens of meetings. Throughout these extensive deliberations, you have heard concerns and pressures from community members, students, and staff. For the past 25 years, trustees and staff alike have struggled with the funding formula and how it impacts staffing and programs, with the full recognition that it has never completely met the needs of our students, especially those who need us the most. Over the years, the board, at staff's recommendation, has drawn heavily on its reserves, especially during the pandemic, to decrease class sizes and to adhere to other public health directions. This was a significant contributor to the deficit, but I don't think any of us would have had it any other way. This board has always done what it needed to do to serve its communities. As staff, we recognize that these decisions, the decision to approve a balanced budget, is a very difficult decision to make. There is always more to do, needs that are pressing that we need to address. Ultimately, as director, I have confidence in your decision, the decisions you make, the directions that you give to staff throughout this budget process, to speak to the needs of students and our staff and our shared future. The report before you this evening maintains funding commitments to areas that we have spent hours discussing in this boardroom since the beginning of your term and beyond. Student safety, model schools for inner cities, mental health, early literacy and mathematics, guidance and support, and much more. We've been able to achieve this despite the fact that the COVID pandemic funding was eliminated from the budget by the provincial government. This budget in many ways seems incomplete, but staff have been able to, in this budget before you this evening, provide you with a balanced budget, knowing that we are using one-time funding and drawing on proceeds of disposition, but we've been able to preserve programs and our jobs. I hope for your approval of this budget this evening and that our work together will continue. I would also like to thank the staff who've spent countless hours over the past 6 months and beyond to contribute to the budget that is before you today. Thank you, and I would ask Associate Director Zucker to speak to the report.
Thank you, and through the chair. I did present a presentation on Tuesday evening, and I'm going to put it up again and go through it a little bit quicker, so I will be skipping over some of the slides, but I think that it's important to highlight some of the ones that we may see. So I just want to make sure that we can see it. Yes. So the first thing, as the director indicated, we have been working on the budget for a number of months, and these two slides just highlight sort of the process and the steps that we took during this process, the approvals that happened at board during this time. So starting in January with our enrollment projections. And again, we know how important enrollment projections are because enrollment is a significant determinant of our grant for student needs. In February, we approved the budget drivers, and again, really, really important to help us to be able to make some of the difficult decisions that are in this budget. And I think the director highlighted in areas that where we were able to maintain resources, it really is in support of these budget drivers. We also looked at our financial position at that time. We did approve school-based staffing in 2 different meetings in March, but for our awareness, that's about 67% of the total budget that you are seeing here today. So approval has already happened for approximately 67% of the budget. In April, once we received the GSN, we were able to update our financial position, which, as we know, didn't change significantly as a result of the release of the GSN. In fact, it only changed by 1.6 million. On May 23rd was the first time that staff brought forward options to balance, with a continuation on June 1st. And again, at that time, staff did indicate that these options were being brought forward. It was staff's best thinking at the time to support the commitments that we want to make as a result of what we believe and was I guess, supported through the consultation with the budget drivers to be able to move forward and support those areas. In the first week in June, we did a number of public information sessions through ward forums and through budget town halls, and we received feedback via questions and delegations from the public. And those were presented on June 13th, and there was a discussion, again, based on that public feedback. The public, what was presented to the public in the week of June 5th did include all of the options to balance that you will see before you today. And so based on the June 13th discussion, staff did bring forward a balanced budget with all of those options included on Tuesday. And then today, obviously, June 22nd, we are looking forward to the approval of the operating budget. So when we talk about balancing the budget, we do know that we have a requirement under the Education Act, and that because we were in a deficit in the previous year, we are in the second year of a 3-year deficit recovery plan. That plan committed us to a $15.1 million deficit for 23-24. We have been operating with a structural deficit, meaning that each year our expenses are higher than our revenues over the last number of years. When we have that deficit on an annual basis, that means that we are using up our reserves, or we're eating into our savings. During the pandemic, as the director mentioned, we did use an additional $69 million of reserves to support student and staff safety. And we know that we have been advocating for the return of this funding to help us to, again, not to balance the budget, because that's not what the return of these will do, but it will give us back some of our savings that we use when we are in a deficit position. As a result of the deficits that we have incurred and the use of our reserves, we no longer have any working fund reserves. So if we look at this slide, you'll see, and this is from our 21-22 financial statements, so the year ended August 31st, 2022, the board has $0 in our working fund reserve, meaning the reserves that we can use to help offset any deficit in year. And our internal reserves decreased significantly because we actually borrowed from our internal reserves in order to balance our budget in 21-22. And we are projecting a deficit for 22-23, the year that we're currently in, of $40 million. So that internal reserve, all else being equal, would drop down to $50 million. We do know that our projected revenues are about $3.3 million in total. Most of it comes from the GSN. Again, the GSN is based on enrollment, and our enrollment is projected to decrease by 200 students, or about 0.1%, to 233,527. Again, I just want to acknowledge the work of the Planning and Enrollment Department, where they do look at past trends, they look at future information, they work very closely with the city in looking at the growth in the city to project the enrollment for the years coming. They have been very successful in the past. In COVID, it was more difficult to project, but as we move away and are more post-pandemic, those numbers are starting to fall back into line with the original projections. So we are confident in that number that is being projected. So it's approximately the same. So we know, again, when our enrollment goes up, then our grants go up. When they go down, the grants go down. And when we stay the same, which is approximately what we were doing, all things being equal, our grants stay the same. We did receive the grants on April 17th, and some of the key changes are noted here. But again, what I think is important to highlight is that not all of these, certainly when we hear about the increase in grants, we expect it to be able to help us to offset our deficit. But in fact, a lot of these grants that we received from the ministry either had expenses directly related to them, like the labor-related changes, or when we moved the temporary or the PPF grants into the GSN, there were already expenses related to them. Or in the instance of the non-staff benchmarks for school operations, so increases related to utilities and material costs and other resources that help us to operate our schools. You'll see that we did receive an increase of 2%, but we know that our expenses are increasing higher than that due to inflation, and that our utilities are expected to go up by 6.5% next year. So although the 2% does help, it still does not fully cover the revenue or the expenses that we are going to incur. As the director indicated, one of the major changes in the Grant for Student Needs was the discontinuation of the COVID Learning Recovery Fund. For TDSB, that's 522 positions, totaling $31.5 million. However, through the budget process since March, we have included in the 23-24 budget 99 of these 522 positions. And they are listed there, including 40 school-based safety monitors, 16 social workers, 15 child and youth counselors, 20 elementary vice principals, and 8 secondary vice principals. So again, when we look at the total reduction, the funding has decreased by the entire amount, but we have maintained 99 of these positions, which means that we need to make reductions in other areas in order to fund these positions. Our other ministry grants include our PPFs, and we did see some increases in PPFs, math not necessarily being one of them, as we are receiving approximately the same funding in math under a different name with different expectations. The difference is, I think you will see more direct support for students with this new PPF. In addition, we are receiving funding to support early reading and reading intervention, and that is also direct support for students. And there is $11.1 million to support de-streaming and transition to high school. And again, you will see an increase there in mostly our teaching staff. For most of these positions, we do not have yet all of the information related to the expectations that the ministry has. Although based on the high level information that we have, we do know that we have been able to include positions in this budget which support these initiatives. And we also did have some of these positions already in place. And so that funding was able to help us to balance the budget by being able to fund those positions that were already existing. Miscellaneous revenue, again, that's all of our other revenue, which includes things like permit fees, leasing revenue, interest revenue, and our international student fees. We know that most of these decreased during COVID as a result of the restrictions that were in place, but we have seen the revenue start to increase to pre-pandemic levels, and we hope that it will continue to increase, and that is something that we continue to monitor. With regards to our expenditures, we do know that 87% of our expenditures relate to salaries and benefits, and a further 7% for supplies and services, and then 4% for fees and contractual. So those are fees and contractual mean those expenses that we have contractual obligations for. One of the biggest ones that you'll see here is transportation. So we have a contract for providing transportation, and there are built-in increases in our transportation contracts. What that does show you is that the other expenses that are left, both the interest on the capital and our other expenses, only equates to about 2% of our total expenditures. When we talk about staffing, and we did, again, look at most of this through school-based staffing, but there are 3 reasons why there would be a change in staffing. It would have to do with the decrease in one-time funding, like COVID funding, an increase or decrease as a result of changes in enrollment. So enrollment goes up, usually classroom teacher numbers go up. Enrollment goes down, usually classroom teachers numbers goes down. Also, there have been a reduction in positions as a result of the decisions that have been made already through school-based staffing or proposed under the options to balance today that you would see here. So this chart, again, shows the change in staffing year over year. And again, there are those 3 main reasons why you would see these changes. And again, COVID, those 423 positions being the majority of the 460 decrease that you see on this page. With regards to expenditures, we have included all of the expenditures. The major changes in expenditures are a result of either contractual obligation, where we see increases that we are obligated to incur under contract. And when we have those increases, usually they are tied to things like inflation. So that's why we would see increases in like our transportation costs, for example. Also, there is an increase in statutory benefits, and we know that that increase in statutory benefits was not funded for 23-24. So CPP has gone up, it will go up, and it's not a projection, this is an absolute. It will go up in 23-24 by approximately $4 million from the current year. In addition, replacement costs related to sick leave, there is a budget pressure there, and we've had to increase our budget related to those replacement costs based on our experience. As we mentioned, there are inflationary increases that are greater than the increase in funding, and we have maintained our safety positions that were added in January. And as we've discussed in a number of our meetings, but specifically when we brought forward the options to balance, the board does have a number of areas where we do spend more than we are funded, and some examples are listed on this page. We know that there were benefit cost pressures. In the last 5 years, benefits have increased by approximately $47 million, and we have not seen a corresponding increase in revenue. So this obviously has created pressure on the budget as well. Our budget drivers were approved in March, and they have been used and taken into account when proposing the options to balance. And important to note, again, the budget drivers not only determined where reductions could be made, but they all helped to determine what is being proposed to be kept. And the financial position, again, in February, we presented, based on the information that was available at the time, a $61 million deficit. We did increase it by the $2.3 million for the SBSMs when we presented the school-based staffing. And when the GSM was released, it did provide some relief of $1.6 million. Therefore, our starting position is $61.7 million. I won't go through school-based staffing again, but we have, it does make up 68% of the board's total budget, and we have a decrease in school-based staffing, again, as a result of the three areas that I talked about before, which are, enrollment-driven, either a reduction in the COVID funding or a budget reduction. And that does represent less than 0.4% of the entire school-based staffing. We did have a motion to add back some other COVID-funded positions in the social workers and child and youth counselors. And what that did was it changed the 61.7 million to a projected deficit of 57.8 million. So that was our starting point. And this is where staff was looking and has been presenting those options to balance. And in order to get to the $15.1 million, there was $42.7 million of reductions required. So this is where staff used our budget drivers, as the director indicated, used some one-time funding. And then when we believed that we had looked at all of our options, which we could implement in a shorter time frame, we have presented all of those to you previously, and I will go through them again today. What we also identified as we worked through this process is some areas where we need to do a more extensive review earlier in the budget process next year in order to assist us in balancing the 24-25 budget. So obviously looking ahead, there are still reductions that will need to be made as a result of the deficit recovery plan, but also the fact that we are using some one-time funding or savings in the current year in order to be able to help us to get to the $15.1 million deficit. And when I say balanced budget, I do consider the $15.1 million balanced based on the commitment that we have made. We all know that we have been granted an extension for our special incidents portion, or the SIP portion of the special education funding, and that we are projecting an increase in this reimbursement of $5 million. So that is good news. We do expect we are putting those claims together right now, and we will be reimbursed based on our actual claims. So that number could be lower and it could be higher. And so the expectation is that if it is higher, obviously that will also help us in this situation. Included in the options to balance are central teachers, 44 central teachers, and 5 centrally assigned principals, for a total proposed reduction of $5.6 million. We are looking at central department discretionary budgets, which again, we have looked at each year, but it is good practice to continue to ensure that we are operating as efficiently as possible. And so we do have projected savings here of $1.7 million. Our general interest courses, as we talked about, we will bring that back into a break-even position through either funding or fee increases, subsidy changes, or looking at the enrollment thresholds, meaning that it is possible that a program wouldn't run if it didn't meet a certain enrollment. We have also looked at our other grants and ensuring that we're spending everything that is considered enveloped or that we have to spend in a specific area. We are going to ensure that we have allocated all the costs to those grants appropriately and to the best of our abilities. And then we are also, because of COVID, we hadn't spent some of those grants in previous years. So we are able to look to those deferred revenue, basically another word for a reserve, to be able to help us next year. So we expect 4.6 million here. One-to-one device deployment, and again, we had a lot of conversation about this on Tuesday, and I just want to be clear. In the past, based on funding that was available, a decision was made to purchase devices a year in advance for the next year. We believe that it would be, and it is best practice, for us to spend the funding in the year in which the expense is incurred. And therefore, we are proposing that moving forward, that happens. What that creates is a 1-year period in 23-24 where there will be no spending, because we will have already purchased for for 23-24 this year, and we will purchase for 24-25 in 24-25. So again, we're not necessarily decreasing our budget. We are creating, as we bring our practice of purchasing these devices into line with best practice, it will create a one-year savings. It also, through board motion, and thank you to trustees, gives us an opportunity to review our one-to-one device deployment to ensure that we are, one, spending the appropriate amount based on usage, and two, look at the funding sources related to one-to-one device deployment to see if we're maximizing all of the options that we have available to us. The next option is the additional virtual school enrollment. We do have another board that is wanting to register. They are not offering virtual schools, and they would like to be able to offer it, or they would like TDSB to offer the remote learning to their students. So those students would register with TDSB, and we are expecting that to increase our revenue by approximately $300,000. And then the last, and again, this is a temporary funding source in order to help us balance. So after looking at all of the other areas, we still did have a deficit, and part of that deficit is created because of the moratorium that is in place. So we do not have the ability to be able to close schools and deal with excess capacity. And that means that we are spending more on operating our schools than we are funded, because we are funded based on enrollment, not on the number of schools or the square footage. So therefore, we have estimated the operating costs related to those schools that could potentially close, or at least the number of students that it relates to, of about 12 million. And then in addition, through board motion, we have added 3.9 million in order to be able to fund the additional staffing that was added. So we are looking at the one-time use of proceeds of disposition of 15.9 million in order to balance the budget. We would need ministry approval to be able to use this funding. So again, when we look at all of those options, we are totaling the 42.7 million that is needed to get us to the $15.1 million. I think that, again, it's important to tie this back to our budget drivers and look at how, even though we have made some reductions and we have used some one-time funding, we are able to support the budget drivers and to support TDSB students as best as possible. And so there's a list here that includes no direct decreases to staff allocation that directly support students, other than their classroom teachers, special education resource teachers, and COVID positions, an increase in teaching positions that directly support early reading intervention, math supports, and de-streaming based on our PPFs. We are keeping, or have added to the budget, 99 positions related to supporting well-being and student safety. There have been no reductions to school budget allocations. There have been no reductions to budgets that directly support equitable outcomes, and examples include the Model Schools Program and the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement. We have increased budget related to Indigenous education, and we've increased our budget related to human rights investigations. So again, based on the top 6 budget drivers that you see on the previous page that are here, that is the work that staff has done to propose this budget. And again, I would be remiss without thanking all of the exceptional work of staff. They are listed here, but I want to identify by name Craig Snyder, Sri Algeswaran, Rajani Nelson, Shaquille Abdullah, and Lori Moore. And again, for trustees, just to understand, aside from Craig, everybody has been relatively new to these positions, some months in the position. So it's been an exceptional team effort, and I wanted to thank you personally. And also, sorry, the committee, the Finance, Budget, and Enrollment Committee. We saw in the beginning the number of meetings that we had. I joked on Tuesday that I think when people signed up for that committee, they may not have realized how many special committee meetings we would have, but they have been special. And I just wanted to thank all of, all of the trustees, because I noticed that most trustees are either here or online even during those meetings. So thank you for all of your time and effort.
All right. We're looking to see who'd like to get us started with speakers. I'm happy to go first if no one wants to speak. So the first thing I want to do is just to thank, oh, right, we're at special board, I forgot. I first just want to thank staff for all the hard work. It has been a lot of really late nights, a lot of worry, a lot of stress, a lot of meetings with us, a lot of meetings amongst yourselves, a lot of meetings with the ministry, I'm sure. And it's a really long process that starts early in the year and goes right to the end. So thank you very much for the dedication you've shown and the listening that you've shown to all of us when we've come to you outside meetings, inside meetings, with questions and with our concerns. I also want to thank Michelle, Trustee Arts, for her really hard work in leading this committee. It's not an easy committee to lead. It's a lot of stress and it's a lot of hours to put in. So thank you for that commitment, and also to Vice Chair DeVitis for your effort as well, because it really is significant, and you've both were in the boardroom, I think, for every single meeting, and it's a lot. So thank you. The first thing I want to do is just, I did send an email to everybody a few minutes ago. There was some a little bit of confusion just about what would be happening with the one-to-one devices. And so Trustee Lee and I have come up with an amendment to the section on budget, or on 1.1 devices in this report. And I'm hoping that we can put that on the screen. It's really, I know I found it a little bit mind-bending when I had to think about paying for something and putting money aside in one budget that goes towards something for next year, and then what happens when you change that practice. Anyways, I think the simplest way that we wanted to do this really just reinforces how we're doing it. And we just wanted to make it crystal clear. So we did an amendment, it doesn't actually change what staff's intention was or anything like that. It's just to make it very clear how this will work. And basically it's that this budget, we don't put $9 million in, because we've already purchased the devices in this year's budget for the 2023-24 school year. In the fall next year, there will be a report coming back about the program to see how we can continue to do it, to see how we will continue to do it, hopefully with a little bit of savings, because when we originally launched it, it was during COVID. And so this gives us a chance to really think about it, and also to align our financial budgeting for this to the year in which the devices are purchased. The additional benefit of this is that we're not expending $9 million in this year's budget, but we will be continuing with the program. There's no deferral of this. We're not stopping the program. There's a commitment to continue the program, and that is in this motion. And the money will simply be budgeted going forward in the year in which the students will be getting those devices for that year. So I hope that makes it simpler for everybody to understand. That was our effort with that. So I'm moving that motion. Thank you. And I believe Trustee Lee is seconding. Thank you. And I'm going to pass, I should have passed the chair. I'm sorry, Vice Chair Shan.
That's all right. So Trustee Lee, you're seconding the motion, right? The amendment.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
And I've
So
spoken on it. I shouldn't have spoken on it. You
any-
can stop me.
Any comments on, any questions on the amendment?
I put my name, Mr. Chair, on the list on the
Go ahead,
amendment.
go ahead, Trustee Lee.
Sorry, is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Team, I just to add on to what Chair Charnoslin has said. This is really meant for us to be more intentional on what we're doing, right? So the purpose of this amendment is to make sure that we give our staff as a board the correct direction to be intentional about what to do with the device program from a programmatic perspective. The change that we're making in this budget this year with this amendment is not because we needed to find a bucket of money and we didn't have anywhere else to look for, and therefore this is the bucket of money that we're putting aside and we're not spending this year so that we can hopefully balance our budget with it. It's not a budgetary perspective, it's a programmatic change. Prior to this year, the one-to-one device ratio program stated that devices were purchased the year before to be made available for the students after the next fiscal year. And what that actually means is that the decision to purchase these devices, how to purchase them, and how the overall construct of the program would have had to be determined up to a year prior to this, right? So we would be making a decision for up to 1.5, maybe 2 years before the devices are purchased and given to the students. Now, what this amendment directs the staff to do is to bring that timeline closer together to say, instead of making a decision up to 2 years in advance, let's make it in a shorter time frame and have the devices purchased within the year that we actually need them to be purchased. In this context, what it allows us to do is it buys staff maybe 6 months or a number of months, and all of us some time to reevaluate the program on how we can implement it in 2024. And because we're no longer asking staff to buy the devices next year or in the next fiscal, in the 2023 fiscal year, we're asking them to buy it 1 year later. So now we have more time to figure out how to implement it, how to save some money, how to make sure that we still provide equitable coverage for the students that deserve them. And by the way, with these change, we also solve our budget problem next year because we also don't have to spend $9 million buying devices that we don't know if we need within amendments to the program that I'm sure staff has already committed to bring back in the fall. So I think this is a good way to go. It becomes more intentional. It's not a budgetary exercise, but a conscious decision that we're making to make the program better and also to be more, I guess, responsible with our resources. So I hope everybody will support. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Trustee Lee. Any other questions or comments on this amendment? Seeing no other speakers on the list, we'll move on to a vote on this. All those in favor of, are we doing e-scribe? Okay, those in favor and opposed, please vote on e-scribe.
Triskandaraja in favor.
James Lee's in favor.
Mover and seconder already.
Trustee Patel in favor.
Trustee Nunziata in favor.
Hassan in favor.
In favor. Trustee Pays.
Trustee Earhart in favor.
Trustee Chernes-Lynn in favor. It's not coming up on eScribe.
Laskin in favor.
Shannon in favor.
Trustee Williams in favor.
Trustee Rajwani in favor.
Trustee Arts in favor.
McLean in favor.
It just
It just came up. Oh my God. Can I take the chair back? That's to.
Okay, I'm gonna, sorry. Trustee Patel also voted, so maybe.
Trustee Patel voted already in favor.
So we'll make that correction. While that's happening, I'm going to pass the chair back to.
I do want to take this.
So we will go back to the minutes Chair Chernes-Lynn has, about 1 minute and 30 seconds left from the previous speaking time, if you can set that up.
don't have 5 minutes. We're going to do it
Just
on
go
your
up to 3:30. Go ahead.
Well, let me just wait for. I'm just going to wait for Ms. Joseph Dowers to start the time. Okay, so 2 quick other things that I just wanted to mention. As we look forward to this budget, I know there are things, it doesn't have everything in it we want. There are things that we feel we really wish we could give in so many different ways. But I just would remind everybody that although we are using PODs, the ability to use PODs is contingent upon us passing this budget. If we do not pass this budget, we do not have the ability to use PODs. And that will significantly compromise what I think we're providing for our students and our families and our staff, because that's over $15 million. So in investments in our students and in programs and in staff. So I just want to put that on the radar. That's health and well-being supports. The other thing I would just want to put on the radar for everybody is that we're in the driver's seat at this point. I know it isn't necessarily the car we want to be driving. It maybe has some dings and it's not, it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that we would like for our students, and not even the bells and whistles. There's things in it that we think are really important that aren't in it, that aren't extras. But at the same time, we are the ones who are driving it, and we have the decision-making power if we pass this budget. And if we don't pass this budget, we lose that ability. And the things that are potentially unfunded and that could be cut are really significant and would have a really profound impact on our students in what I think would be a terrible way. So I hope that trustees will consider those things as they are deliberating this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll pass the chair back to you, Chair Stanislaw.
Thank you, Vice Chair Shen. Trustee Dawson, thank you.
Nobody wants to touch this one. Okay. I firstly want to echo Trustee Turnos-Lynn's comments to staff. This is my first time around with this process, and it has been incredibly grueling, even just for me. So I can't imagine what it's been like for the people who have spent countless hours putting this together, going back to the drawing board, coming back to us again. You are greatly, greatly appreciated by me, and I especially am thankful for the comprehensive layout of the information, because again, this is my first time around. Again, with it being my first time round, I'm getting used to the political nature of this role. And one of the things that is interesting to process is the outside noise, the influence on me and my colleagues of external stakeholders. I entered into this role, I ran in the election because I truly believe in public education, and I firmly believe that we as a board can support our students if we pass this budget. Not in all ways that we would hope. We've really been given a shoddy deal by our government, so I'm not in any way justifying the cuts that we're going to have to make. But I did want to relate some of the things that we could potentially lose if we go into trusteeship, and I want to relate those things back to my family. So the first thing is the one-to-one Chromebook devices. My son is in grade 6. In grade 5, he received a Chromebook. That Chromebook has been invaluable to his education. He has ADHD. He is not able to manage papers. And so having everything on this Chromebook, having everything in the Google Classroom, not only is it the way of the future, it is also something that is incredibly, incredibly important to my son's achievement. If we don't pass our budget, we've had all kinds of deliberations over one-to-one Chromebooks, we'll lose that. We will lose that. They are not, this is a choice that we fund. So it's on the table to be cut. The next thing is special education support. We allocate over $60 million in extra spec ed support, and that's to support students like my children. Both my kids have ADHD. They need that extra support. They are not quote unquote designated through an IPRC because ADHD is not recognized as an exceptionality by our government, but they benefit from support, from special education support that we fund above and beyond what is provided to us. Lunchroom supervisors. Nowhere else has them. No other board has lunchroom supervisors. We have paid lunchroom supervisors to the tune of $2 million. 200 lunchroom supervisors, I think, or maybe more. Probably a lot more. But I know it costs $2 million. And if we don't pass this budget, again, that's going to go. And finally, I would just say, actually, I'll say a couple more things. I've got a minute and 37 seconds. Outdoor education. Again, son in grade 6 went to Sheldon this year. It was his first time away from home. I missed him like crazy. But I know for a fact that I was the only one missing anything because he had a blast. He had an absolute blast. He would not have that opportunity if we did not choose to fund outdoor education. Swimming. My kids learned how to swim at the Winona pool. That swimming pool is in close proximity to our home, and it is extremely important for us to keep that pool open. Again, we choose. This is a choice of our board because we can choose. Once we lose our ability to choose, those things are on the chopping block. And, I'm very fearful of that. I'm fearful specifically for what will happen to my children and children like them. So I just wanted to relate that back to a personal story because this is a personal reason for me to have gotten into this job. I ran for personal reasons, and I'm making my decisions for personal reasons. I am not going to succumb to outside influences of a political nature in order to compromise my personal belief and my personal reasons for getting into this role. So I hope and encourage my colleagues to vote on this budget. I think it's the right thing to do, and I hope you will join me. Thank you.
Up next, we have Trustee King. Please go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. We are only 3 speakers in, and I feel like we are echoing already some of the same sentiments. I just want to, I've been very quiet through finance meetings, and I do want to go on record as stating that we know that we are fundamentally underfunded and underserved by this provincial government. And by not meeting the increased financial costs, like the statutory benefits that staff presented, costs based on inflation, the ministry is in fact defunding public education and the Toronto District School Board. Consideration of this budget was not made lightly by any of my colleagues, I know, and not by myself, knowing that our needs exceed what's allocated to us in this proposed budget. I'm really thankful to staff for the recommendations and to my trustee colleagues for the motions that they have put forward to prioritize keeping caring adults in the buildings. So thankful for the social workers, child youth counselors, school-based safety monitors, VPs, and also aquatic instructors that have been identified. We saw this in the budget driver priorities, and I've also seen it identified very much in my community. When I go on school tours, when I meet with the principals, when I speak to parents, they are very specifically identifying lunchroom supervisors, ECEs, child youth counselors, English language support as the greatest factors for safety and success for their children and the students in the building. I'm also very cognizant of what this kind of underfunding means for the sector, a sector where many of our education workers are women and are racialized, and these cuts not only impact students in our schools, they also impact the livelihood and the employment of current staff as well as the prospects for the health of those roles in education. So I agree with what we heard from our chair and from Trustee Dawson, that I do think it's important to balance this budget in order to maintain the influence and the responsibility that we have as trustees and to protect the advancements that we've made in some very specific areas of equity, Indigenous education, model schools, and the Center of Excellence for Black Student Achievement. I'm also very encouraged by the engagement of the community through this process. We saw community organize, rally, email, and participate in consultations to express their concerns and to demand the funding that we need. And I feel assured that that will grow and continue over time. So I look forward to that collaborative work and the continued advocacy to move us to a place of the more sustainable funding that we know that we need. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Trustee Rajagulasingham. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair. This has been always kind of a challenging, well, it's always been a challenging process for the past 5 years. And in the past 5 years, there were times when I supported the budget, and there were times when I voted down the budget. And I'm reflecting on a really crucial year that was very telling of kind of the environment that we were in. And that was the year when the pandemic had started, and we had to come up with our return to school plan heading into our first pandemic school year. The TDSB had come up with different plans that were smaller class sizes, and our staff did tremendous work. But we did not have enough funding from the province, who has a responsibility to fund those schools, those class sizes, if they really do care for our students, but they failed. We also heard at that time from Toronto Public Health that they didn't support what the province had outlined as return to school guidelines. So that year, Trustee Sri Skandaraja and I put forward a motion asking to delay the board decision on the budget by a week, because how do we make that decision? We don't have enough funding. We're hearing from our health partners that schools aren't safe. How do we make those decisions? So time and time again, and that motion was defeated 10 to 12, I think. And time again, we're in this position. Here we are this school year. We're out of the pandemic, but we're clearly seeing the impact. And I don't need to go into details because we're all seeing kind of these fires that are happening in our schools. And again, the ministry, the province has failed teachers by underfunding statutory benefits and sick leaves. They have failed students by taking away much needed supports that the COVID recovery funding has provided. Lunchroom supervisors, child and youth counselors, social workers, incredible supports that cannot be replaced, taken away. And now we're in this position where we need to find that money. And I think when the ministry has failed to provide funding, our staff has done tremendous work trying to find the money to fund much needed critical supports. And I want to, when I'm reflecting on this, it's not that the TDSB is making the choice not to fund, but we're in a position where we're not getting that money and we're having to find it, and it's having impact on our students. All cuts impact students, but it's always underserved students that will be impacted more. And one thing that makes this budget cycle different for me in my decision is previously there were times when, for example, French transportation was on the chopping block. And we know that that would impact certain communities more than others. And I think when looking at the way this budget decisions and recommendations that staff have made, they have tried to find ways that would not cause further disruptions to students. I mean, all cuts have disruptions to program and services, but I think this year they've taken more care to ensure that it's not disproportionately impacting one community over the other. So I think I will be supporting the budget this year. And I want to thank all staff that worked on this. I'm pretty sure Associate Director Zucker and Chief Executive Snyder have the budget presentation memorized at this point. I hope you take some time to not say it in your sleep almost. But I want to thank all staff for their work on this. It's infuriating that time and time again, we have to carry the burden of this when we're forced into this position. And while we may all vote down this budget, what worries me is giving that power to the province and them not funding crucial supports that are provided through special education, through child and youth workers, through social work that the province, that the TDSB is funding for. We are spending more money than we have, and I'm worried that it is being perceived as us being fiscally irresponsible and not carrying our duties out as trustees. And I think going forward, this is the first year of a 4-year term. As trustees, I think we're going to have to think about how our advocacy strategy is going to look like going forward. But I think it's very telling that if coming out of a pandemic, this is what we're facing, I'm worried what the years to come are going to look like. So thank you to staff, and I appreciate all the work that you put into this.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Rajakulasingam. Next up, we have Trustee McLean. Please go ahead.
Thank you, the chair. Initially, I'd like to ask for a motion to suspend the bylaws as they. Okay, you have it? Okay, thank you. Ms. Joseph Dowers has been kind enough to help me write it. In essence, what I'd like us to do is suspend the bylaws for formal board so that we can speak more than once. I think this is, those meetings usually start much later in the evening. I think I make room for the possibility that we're going to play with it. There's going to be some maneuvering in terms of what's being suggested here and moving in and out. So I think a full discussion and an opportunity to talk about what changes may be discussed or suggested would be beneficial. So this is the most important decision we make. The fact that some people spoke and get shut out.
Before you go into a long song and dance, do we have a seconder for this? Is it possible to just ask if we have a seconder? Trustee DeVitis. Okay, you can just finish. You're welcome to have the floor.
You just called it a song and dance. What do I go on now?
You're very entertaining, and you use humor extremely well.
Apparently I've made my point, so I'll sit down.
Well, I just want to explain how this works, because we need 2/3 of members present in the meeting and at home, though, right? Like virtually, in favor in order to do this. So are we going to do this by show of hands or because it's on eScribe? Okay, it's already on eScribe. Thank you for sending this in advance, Trustee McLean. And it's open on eScribe.
In favor?
Can people speak to
In favor.
Trustee
Olka-Rotman, not in favor.
Okay, Trustee Pay, how do you vote?
Trustee P in favor.
Trustee Rajwani in favor.
She said in favor.
Trustee Hassan in favor.
Thank you. Trustee Wong, how do you vote? Trustee Lee, how do you vote? In favor. I think mark Trustee Lee absent if he hasn't voted yet. Are we missing anybody else? She's, yeah. And that has carried. Okay, so we will use our committee rules for speaking.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I had an IT issue. James Lee was in favor.
Okay, well, you're in the majority, more than majority. It had
got it.
2/3, so it has passed.
Thank you, but it would be great to record that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Trustee McLean, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. And now I'm worried about breaking into song, and we all know how well that went at.
Don't waste your time. Although you have more time, I guess.
I got lots of that. I can go back. I just made it so I can go as many times as I want. Thank you. There's been a lot of talk in the press and in the community about $22 billion that the province has that they haven't allotted. And some have suggested a relationship to the education challenges. And the truth of the matter is I don't care much about their $22 million. We've known for a long time that the return on investment, they've calculated to be $1.3 of economic benefit for every dollar we spend on public education. And I don't really care about the investment side of this. Last Friday morning, I attended the International Day of the African Child Assembly at Winston Churchill Collegiate, and I was reminded of the protests and the courage that South African children of Soweto, and they pleaded and some paid the ultimate price for their desire for a better and fair education. And I think that's a fundamental human right that, and a moral responsibility that a society has to provide their children with a good education that opens doors and allows them to control their fate in the world, allows them to identify how they're going to contribute to society, allows them the opportunity to chase their dreams in whatever direction they go. So it always offends me the extent at which the provincial government doesn't properly fund education. That being said, and we're faced with choices based on the fact that they don't fund us in a whole litany of areas that aren't our fault, and we don't have any cards to play. I'm encouraged by OPSPA's joint mesh. They've finally come to where everyone's in agreement that this is the path forward. And I've been a trustee for 5 years, and I've been a little discouraged by OPSA's willingness to kind of all gather and all point in the same direction about trying to seek this. But for me, I have to support this or support whatever comes in and out. But at the end of the day, I know I can support this. And if we come up with a better version, then that's great. But this over supervision isn't a tough choice for me. Like, this allows us the opportunity. Children in our schools, for the most part, won't see what's happening. For the most part, they'll be able to go seamlessly from one year to the next. And I think that's important. So I'll take the last minute to echo the thoughts of colleagues. I want to thank staff for all their efforts on this. I want to thank the members of FBEC for spending all the time and effort trying to get to a place that, that we could support. And I'd like to thank all our colleagues who attended FBEC regularly and contributed to those conversations, asked tough questions, and help us get to a place that led to something that we could potentially support. And I also want to thank all the people, members of the public that either online and through the webinar or through our various ward forums that came out, gave their time, gave their thoughts, and helped shape this debate. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Trustee McLean. You have 3 seconds to dance or sing. Okay, next up we have Vice Chair Shen. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also want to start off by thanking all the staff, the director, the associate director, Zucker, and others for the work that was very difficult. Difficult not because of the technical side of things. I know you're very careful. Difficult because of the impact that these decisions have. You know, about 2 decades, a little over 2 decades ago, I was a high school student when this austerity agenda started. And, you know, I was at the forefront at Queen's Park and other places. And in 2 years, my son would be going to high school. And we talk about this cumulative impact. And it is critical to look at this in context rather than just single year. You know, we are accountable to the Ministry of Education, but we are not appointed by the Ministry of Education. We are elected by the people, and regardless of where their political, where in the political spectrum they are seeing the impact on their schools, and they might articulate it differently regardless of depending on where they come from. But it is critical to understand that we have, through series of actions over the last 25 years in this boardroom, different people have sat here and made decisions thinking along the lines of Trustee McLean's last comment, that the change is not as significant, there will be a smooth process, but compare what happened from 20 years to today. Our schools and our public education system has become unrecognizable to the ones many people who sitting here benefited from. So I do think that it's important to contextualize. My decision is not necessarily a reflection of my views on what the staff are proposing. You know, this is not the staff's budget. This is in fact not even the trustees' budget, because this is predominantly driven by what the province has dictated to us. So my decision to vote against the budget right from the beginning has been around not being supportive of this austerity agenda. As a trustee, I see my role. Again, everybody sees it differently. I'm not judging the trustees who are voting in favor for personal reasons. I am also refusing to be judged for voting my personal reason as a refugee youth who came to this country and believed in public system, and seeing it deteriorate to the extent it is. And in 20 years, we would be gone. Different set of trustees will be here doing the same thing and doing this harm. And talking about the bus we are driving, different people have driven that bus ourselves as thinking that we are driving. But where are these trustees over the last 20 years driving this bus to? Is it the destination we want to drive, or is it the destination somebody else is letting us drive? In fact, fearing that if they drove, they will take it into the ditch earlier, but we are taking these students and parents and our community into the ditch so slowly. In fact, that's what's bothering me today. I think so. One of the comments our associate director made is that we've tried hard to make this budget have the minimal amount of negative impact. That's not the kind of budget I want to support. The director and associate directors don't have choice over it. We want budget is the vision of this board. And the minimal impact, negative impact, is not the direction I want to. I want to be able to try to maximize the positive impact we can have. And it's unfortunately not the frame that we are in. And we cannot continue to do this. It's not about like me being part of this trustee and my role as a trustee. And I came back to this role with frustrations because I've seen this happen way too long. And my vote is a reflection of that. So I wanted to say at the end, I think the main concern I have is the chronic underfunding of this system is eroding the faith in public education. And we hear that from everybody. People who are activists are saying it, people who are parent advocates, regardless of where they are, people who might consider themselves conservative are saying it. Everybody is saying the same thing, saying they don't have faith in this system. They don't have faith anymore. And how did we get to this stage? And how are we going to continue to go along this line? Because the whole agenda is to erode the faith in public education system so that alternative ways can come into place. And we have to stop it at some point. And I may not be thinking that this is the right time, but I personally would not be able to support anything that cuts educators, coaches, safety monitors. The pandemic is not over. We did that campaign. The government did not respond. So what? We go ahead and we continue to cut. The impact of the pandemic is going to be felt longer. So I'm not urging anybody to do anything outside their norms and outside their views, but I will not be supporting the budget for the reasons I have articulated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Shan. Next up, we have Trustee Laskin. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I feel like this will sound like a rebuttal to Trustee Shen. So I've been here pre-amalgamation where education was funded by the taxpayer, directly funded by the taxpayer through a levy, so that school boards could fund to the extent possible to meet community expectations. And your ward forums were not filled with parents, they were actually filled with mostly seniors, because they would come to complain about the tax rate and the mill rate, because their dollars funded education, and they saw that direct correlation. And then we had amalgamation, and the thought was, let's amalgamate the 6 boards in Toronto and Metro, and it'll be such a great cost savings. Well, the reality is all it was that our taxpayers went out of the City of Toronto to pay for a one-size-fits-all education system, and nobody's expectations could be met. But after a decade or so, we were finally able to put, for example, education assistants, this is pre-FDK, in the boards that didn't have education assistants, because at amalgamation, 3 of the amalgamated school boards didn't have education assistants. They didn't bus for transportation, for French immersion, for example. So we were finally able to take those limited resources, but try to increase the equity of access across the system. We're nowhere there yet, but we've tried over the years to do so. Education has never been fully funded to the extent possible because we don't control our dollars anymore. We used to be able to. We don't anymore. And it doesn't matter which government, which political stripe, what has been in power, it has never been fully funded. And we have always been fighting this fight. And it is a public fight. Public only really notices, though, when it directly affects them. That's always been a problem now, since taxpayers don't directly fund it and it goes into a bigger pot. We don't get the seniors to our ward forums anymore. But I have always felt through the years that because we don't control our own funding, we do control, however, what we do with that funding. And that is our job as trustees. And I have always preferred to try to stay at the table than not at the table, because I was there in 2002 when we were taken under supervision. And believe you me, the things that we care about were the first things to go. No question, there's proof of that. And the fact that that was done not in public. I mean, we're in public. People know what we stand for and accountable for our votes. That was done behind the scenes. If you go to the minutes of the board, you can't even see a full accounting of that budget over 2 years. Because it was done basically in secret. But our schools certainly felt it, and we have never been funded. As a parent in the former Toronto board, we had community workers that used to come into our school council meetings and used to help us with all kinds of issues. That was one of the first things to go. We had to fight when power was restored in 2003. By the Liberal government at the time, from the Harris government was defeated. We never got the funding back to the extent that we needed it. So as this like provincial education now, our needs are different in Toronto. There is no question. But I've always thought of it as a card, as the deck of cards. You're dealt the hand, right? We don't have control over the hand we're dealt, but we certainly have control over how we're playing it. And that is why I will support this budget. I will continue to work to advocate for appropriate funding. In OPSPA, I will continue to do my best to ensure the voices of the unique needs of urban boards are being met, just like the unique needs of rural boards are met. And around this table, I will continue to support differentiated funding so that those that are underserved have the chance to succeed in the same way that those that are privileged do. And that, Madam Chair, is what I'd like to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Laskin. Next up, we have Trustee Arts. Please go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I just want to convey my gratitude to staff. I said things at, I did this at the last FBEC meeting, but I think everybody's here now. So I just want to say a very heartfelt thank you to staff and to trustees, especially the trustees on the committee, on the FBEC committee, for the work this year. What I have very much appreciated about the current budget cycle, I still have a little bit of PTSD from 2019, and when the ministry did make large cuts to education, and we actually really we did not have the money for programming. I appreciated the work then. I am very appreciative that what has come back, especially with the fresh eyes that we have around the table now in our new staff and new associate directors and new finance staff, and even through labor negotiations, is a different way to look at things than I think we've ever done before, in terms of what could we review, how could we do things differently, how could we do this in a different way, work with our labor partners to change things up so that we keep the programs and services the same, so that the services are still going to the classrooms. We still have what students and families expect in our schools, but we just do it differently than we did before. And that is very refreshing because, as Trustee Laskin pointed out, the TDSB is a beast that was amalgamated from 6 boards that all came to the table during amalgamation with their own wish list. And there are, one of the things I joined the board for, when I ran in, or what I wanted to join the board for, were a lot of pieces that were still things we did since amalgamation, which didn't really make sense. So I've very much appreciated over the last 5 years the huge strides that we've made here to change equity, to change programming, to put the interests and student voice first in terms of doing that. And I think that's reflected in this budget as well. I don't see our government changing really anytime soon, but I've very much appreciated the work here, and I've appreciated being able to take the work that we're doing here to the provincial level, and help get other boards to come to the table in terms of discussions and influencing the province. And I think if we keep working, we keep moving our system forward, but we'll keep moving the province forward as well. Because we are a beast in the TDSB, because we have the capacity to set best practices, and we do. When you hear the reports from our different curriculum leads from STEM and the arts, different programs, when they come and present enthusiastically about the kinds of programs they develop, those things end up going back to the province. I know we've always had staff that push back to the province on those best practices. And so what we do here, we can, and what I'm looking forward to continuing doing with this board, is moving that bar, setting those best practices, putting equity at the forefront, and making sure that we drag the province along with us. So thank you very much for all of the work, and I'm looking forward to being done for the summer.
Thank you, Trustee Arts. I think everybody is looking forward to less meetings. Trustee Pay, you are next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My fellow trustees, before we point a finger at the province, before we ask for more money, we need to ensure we're running things efficiently with minimal waste. We must be fiscally responsible. There's only one taxpayer. Money doesn't fall from the sky. We can't afford a TDSB department's program running huge deficits. We can't afford to paying consultants hundreds of thousands of dollars per hour. We can't afford to continue having teachers, administrators, and other staff on home assignments for months or even years. This costs TDSB millions of dollars each year, money that can be spent on students in the classroom. The bottom line is we need to be more efficient in our operations. We need staff to sharpen their pencils and bring costs under control. Madam Chair, we can't always go into the province beg for money. We need to get our house in order. We need a more transparency and more accountability in our budget process and in our operations. Trustees need timely, accurate information to ensure we are making the best decision on the budget on the behalf of Toronto families. Although I have a lot of questions regarding this budget, but I want to support staff at this time moving forward and make sure our new year we have a smooth transition, but also I want to start working harder on taxpayer money, make sure we work efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Pei. Up next, we have Trustee Earhart.
Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Through the chair, I feel the ordering is, because I have almost the opposite to say. For everyone here, I'll be voting no tonight, and I hope that everyone has seen that I've been an active participant in this budget process. I care very deeply, and I'm very grateful to staff. Look at me, I'm crying because I don't think there's any version of success tonight, because I see what the impacts of this budget will be in my community and other communities, and I've heard very clearly from them that we can't sustain any more cuts and that we can't accept any more cuts. And so that is where I'm coming from. I want to thank staff, though, because I feel like this is the best possible balanced budget in the circumstances, and you've put it forward as you're required to do. And I want to thank my trustee colleagues for looking to do more with less. I admire that, and I'm grateful for it. I want to thank everyone from my community, the thousands who have signed petitions, who have written letters, who have been calling the Premier, who have cried with me, who have joined rallies, who have spoken very loudly, who've brought their children to Queen's Park on the regular in recent months to articulate not just for their children, but for Toronto's children, for Ontario's children, for adequate education to support their well-being as well as student success. And so it's from that place, knowing that we are at a time of extraordinary need, that I can't in good conscience support the budget tonight, knowing that these needs will not be met, and knowing that we have a government that is projected to be running surpluses, that has been receiving reports, who has been willingly and cruelly denying Ontario's children the funds needed for well-being. And so thank you to everyone here, and I hope that we will see better days ahead for education and for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Earhart. I'm not seeing any further speakers on the list, so I think with this, we will open the vote. Oh. And there's been a request for a recorded vote, just so everyone is aware.
Trustee Candidato in favor?
Oh, I need a mover and a seconder.
Michelle should know.
Trustee Arts, and we need a seconder.
Nunziata.
Thank you, Trustee Nunziata. So with that, we will get the vote opened.
James Lee.
Trustee Patel in favor.
Trustee Pay in favor.
Roger Singham in favor.
Trustee Rajwani in favor.
Chernis Lynn in favor.
Hassan in favor.
Earhart against.
Trustee Lilka Rotman, Trustee Lee, Trustee Wong. We need to hear from you. Thank you.
Lee in favor.
Okay, we're still waiting on Trustee Lilka Rotman and Trustee Wong. If you could please cast your votes.
Wilka Rotman said she can't unmute. Pardon
She's
me?
on the phone.
She's on the phone.
Hi, it's Trustee Loca Robin. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, in favor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just Trustee Wong. Trustee Wong, are you there? I think we are going to have to mark her absent unless, is Hastings, did we get one from Hastings? I don't know. Is he here? Okay. All right, Trustee Wong, since we aren't hearing from you, we are going to mark you as absent. And we'll close the vote with that. Thank you, trustees. That has carried 16-3. And with that, I would ask if I can have a mover and a seconder to adjourn this meeting. Trustee Rajwani, Trustee McLean. Trustee Loka-Rotman, you missed it, sorry. But there's another one coming up if you want to wait. So we do have another special meeting scheduled for this evening. Perhaps we'll just take, it's at 7, so perhaps we'll just take a rest. And I know, but we updated the we did update the website earlier to reflect an earlier time. So that, because we thought maybe this would go quickly. So we will convene back at 7, I think. And there's, is the feed closed? Yes? Yes, we are. Oh, did I ask for, I had a mover and a seconder. All in favor? Any opposed? You're opposed? Okay, that has carried. The meeting is adjourned.